Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. Today, we've got the panel show going once again. We've got a brand new guest, first time ever on the channel. Welcome, Will Carroll, drummer from Death Angel. What's happening, Will? We've got Steve Keeler from Rock Fantasy, and of course, Brian Slagel from Metal Blade Records, founder of Metal Blade Records. Thanks for joining us, guys, for a very special show, a show that has been asked for many, many, many times. We're going to rank the albums of Canadian thrash, prog-metal, whatever you want to call them, legends, Voivod. They got a lot of albums. What we're going to do is we're each going to give our top 10, and then maybe we'll talk about some of the ones that didn't kind of make the cut. So that's how we're going to work it. And as we always do, we'll start with number 10. We'll work our way back to number 1. We'll each ping pong off each other. I'm going to let our brand new guest start us off today. Will, you can start off with number 10.
Number 10 for me is Roar. I love that album. I mean, like we were saying earlier before we started filming that I love every Voivod album except for the self-titled one. But I love Roar. It's the first album where Away starts using double bass, so it's a little rocky. So listening to it sometimes is kind of difficult, listening to it from beginning to end. And on some parts of the album, it's just a cacophony of noise. You can't really tell what's going on, which adds to the charm. But it's also not one of my favorite albums just because it's so noisy. But it lives up to the title of the album, Roar. It does sound like that. And the drums are a little bit off the rails at certain points. But I love the album cover, and that's my number 10.
Cool. Brian, you want to go next?
Sure. This was a weird one for me, putting this list together, because aside from the top 2, I literally could have just jumbled all the other ones up and they come wherever they did. So it was kind of difficult. So really, the 3 through 10 are not really in any order specifically, but they're in order because they have to be because of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But number
That's
10,
the
I
format.
have Caters.
So what's number 10?
Caters.
Oh, Caters.
From 2006, yeah.
Cators, Caters, I don't know.
I think I read somewhere that it's
How are you saying
pronounced
Canadian?
Quators.
Yeah.
I always call it Cators. I don't know. Does it really matter? I don't know. Kind of a bittersweet album, though, right? Because that's like Piggy had just died, and they just kind of basically took whatever he had recorded and just kind of threw it all together.
Yeah,
and it kind of sounds it, right?
Yeah, that's probably why it's 10. But there's some cool stuff on there,
yeah.
And it's always interesting with bands because from the fan perspective, you talk to bands about why they put certain songs on the records or why certain riffs don't make it. And I thought there is definitely, certainly not the best Voivod records. There's some pretty tasty riffs in there that probably only saw the light of day because of what happened. But.
Yeah,
sure. My number 10, which I didn't do my homework too good, I've been so busy, but I'm going with Phobos. One of the albums. Phobos?
I love it.
From the late 90s edition of
That was their techno record, right?
It was
No, that was Chronic.
Oh, that's you're right.
Chronic we weren't allowed to use today. So we're using that because that would have been 15 albums actually.
Yeah.
Chronic, yeah.
All right, that's my number 10.
Phobos is not bad. I thought that guy Eric Forrest kind of fit in okay. I mean, it's
great.
My number 10.
I think it's going to be in Will's top 10. I'm getting it.
We'll see. My number 10, Infinity from 2009. So that's the last album with any contributions from Piggy. Kind of bittersweet, but I think it's a pretty good album. I mean, most of these albums are pretty strong. Global Warnings, God Phones, and Volcano are kind of my favorite songs off that album. But I think the production's really good. It's got a nice big fat sound. Maybe not as kind of progressive as some of the albums that they'd done in the 90s, but still pretty damn good.
It's my favorite of the 3 Jason Newsted albums. That one's my favorite too.
Yeah.
All right, Will, you're up.
Number 9 would be War and Pain. That album's weird because it's all single kick. I mean, being a drummer, I'm talking from a drummer's perspective, but it's all single kick, so it definitely has like a Motorhead, punky kind of vibe to it. So this sounds like Voivod's still trying to find their get their feet on the ground, you know, trying to find their way a little bit. So I love it. It's great for the punk vibe, but it's just a little. It's not what you expect from Voivod normally because it's their first album, so they're still finding their way. But that's my number 9.
So at number 9, I'm getting a little scared because I'm vibing with Pete this week, which doesn't ever happen really. So at number 9, I have Infinity as well. And as a note for that record, obviously, you know, part of the lore of Voivod are the album covers because, you know,
right.
Pretty spectacular artwork on all those, and I love all of them. But for whatever reason, maybe because it's just super simple and it's very metal. But that's my favorite of all the Voivod album covers.
There's hope for us yet, Brian.
I know.
Definitely an iconic image. Definitely awesome cover for sure.
So for my number 9, you're done, right, Brian? I didn't mean to interrupt you. If I did, I'm going with Angel Rat, which was kind of like their proggy, I guess their most commercial record, I guess I would say. I believe that was a tour they toured with Rush. Maybe I'm wrong. Didn't Rush?
Terry Brown produced the album, and he was a big-time Rush producer.
I remember them touring with Rush, and I think it might have been that record. But
yeah, you're probably right.
I love that song, Panorama.
You might be right, yeah.
Of course, The Prowl, I like that. You know, people are going to say, yeah, he's not a metalhead anymore. He likes this stuff. You know, it's got, like, maybe like Rush. Rush were very heavy, and they were kind of experimenting with things. I thought it was a pretty strong album. Angel Rat for my number 9.
All right.
My number 9, Target Earth from 2013. That's the first album with Chewy. I personally think he has kind of fit in really well with this band, probably because he was such a huge fan beforehand and knows the riffs, knows the songs. His style is not that much different than Piggy. So I think it all just kind of really works. And, you know, very strong album. Mechanical Mind, title track, both some favorites of mine.
Yeah, Mechanical Mind. What a song.
It's a really good song, right? Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Definitely.
All right, Will, you're number 8.
Number 8 is Target Earth. And for the same reasons he said, I think the song Mechanical Mind, like I talked to Chewy about that song once, and he told me he was trying to capture every era of Voivod into one song, and he did a great job. I mean, there's lots of riffs that you could have heard on Phobos, and then there's some rocky stuff, and then there's definitely some Dimension Hatros type of elements on that song. It's like a roller coaster ride, and just that song alone would be in my top 10 list, you know. But the album as a whole is great as well. Not my favorite album cover though. The album cover was a little disappointing, I thought, but the album itself is fantastic. Chewy is a godsend. He's a huge part of Voivod now, and he's saved Voivod. I think he's great.
He was the right guy. I mean, they made a great choice there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed on all that. It's up to me, Brian.
Back to you, Brian.
We're number 7?
8.
Oh, sorry, 8. I'm jumping ahead. At 8, I have The Outer Limits. Great title.
Nice.
Love that album.
That's pretty cool album.
Too.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Like I said, it's hard to for me, it kind of, I could have done these in a whole bunch of different orders, but this is what I did today. It's a great record.
Call them against the wall, see where they stick, right? All right, so we're up at number what? Number 8?
8.
I'm with one of their latter albums, the one before. Actually, no, the newest album, The Wake. One of the tracks I thought there was a very strong track, Absolute Beings, and I think that came out, what, last summer maybe, or the year before now?
2018.
A couple years ago.
Playing the heck out of that in the store when it came out. And people were like, what about Voivod? I said, that's a pretty strong record. I sold quite a few copies of that.
It's a good one.
But The Wake is my number 8.
My number 8, I'm going to go with Angel Rat from 1991. I think it's probably the one that kind of stands out in their whole catalog. It's really different, but it's still really cool. I mean, it's got Terry Brown produced it. It kind of has that Rush sound. There's a little bit of like alternative rock kind of blending in there, which I know for a lot of people that was kind of weird when it came out, but I think it's got some really good songs on it. I mean, Gollum, Twin Dummy, Clouds in My House, Best Regards. I mean, those are pretty damn good songs. It is a little mellow, it's a little poppy, but it's really catchy, and I think the instrumentation's there. So I like it. I think it's good. It's different, yeah, but sometimes different's okay.
Yeah. Number 7 for me is Negatron. That's the first album with Eric Forrest on vocals and bass, and they really came back to form on that album. I think after Angel Rat and Outer Limits, that were very slick and very polished albums, great albums, but just a little different. They came back to their thrash, sci-fi, horror sci-fi sound, and I thought Eric's voice fit the music perfectly. And I saw them on that tour a couple times, and they were great live as a 3-piece. They were great, and it was a hard thing to bounce back, losing Snake and Blackie. So they really came back hard and did a good job, I think.
And they added just like a touch of industrial element, but not too much,
totally,
that it didn't detract from things. And that's good, because a lot of the bands kind of fell into that industrial kind of whatever you want to call it, and went overboard with it. I think Voivod added just enough, and it made the music pretty interesting.
I mean, they always had an industrial element in their lyrics, at least,
Yeah.
And so it was a logical step. Like Motley Crue going industrial, that was completely fucking ridiculous.
I don't know what that was. So you guys are making this really easy for me, because all of your comments are exactly what I would be saying for the records that I'm picking at probably after you guys. And again, Pete and I, scarily enough, are on the same wavelength, because I've got is it me now? I'm getting it all. Yeah, I have Angel Rat as my number 7. So Pete and I are vibing again. And one thing that I do, because we did quite a bit of work with Terry Brown as well. First of all, being a massive Rush fan was just kind of the fanboy. I mean, was just like freaking out that we worked with him. But what an amazing guy he is. Super cool, great producer, really awesome. He would be very happy to tell you endless stories of Rush if you bothered him about it. But he was really good to work with as a producer too. And I thought that, even though these weren't Voivod's, quote unquote strongest records, I thought there's some really, really good stuff on there. And I think working with Terry Brown kind of helped them get some of that stuff out as well. So.
Ryan, didn't he work with Fates Warning on a couple albums?
Yeah, we worked
thought so.
with Fates Warning for a few. We did a couple other things with him as well. I mean, Fates Warning was kind of the perfect thing for him to work on, because they were so heavily influenced by Rush. So
yeah.
Which albums did he do? Parallels or
Parallels, Perfect Symmetry, and
Inside Out, right?
Inside Out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Steve.
Number 7 for me is the early album, which is quite noisy and very almost kind of punky. The War and Pain, with the classic Voivod track, and I just listened to it on my morning walk, and I haven't listened to that album in a long time. And it wasn't my favorite in my early years with them either, but I thought it was worth it being in the top 10 today. Number 7, of course, the classic War and Pain.
And number 7, The Outer Limits from '93. If nothing for the Jack Luminous, 17-minute long track, right? I mean, give them a lot of credit for doing something like that, because they were like one of those few bands who were kind of dipping into progressive metal who didn't go that route, and then all of a sudden, it's all right. Let's put in one of those gigantic, humongous, epic tracks. So very cool. I like that album. It's a fun
album. Number 6 for me is Phobos, which is the second album with Eric Forrest. And lyrically, it's part 2 to Dimension Hatros. It's a continuation of the story. So that really roped me in right away when that album came out. I was like, oh, I have to hear what happens, So I love the lyrics, and they use nothing but 70s and old equipment for that album. So it sounds very dusty, if you will. But they use 2-inch tape and this really old equipment. And it's a huge contrast from Negatron, which is very digital sounding and mechanical and industrial. So Phobos, which also has industrial elements too on Phobos, but it's a very natural sounding album, and great album just to zone out to and burn out to and get high to. So yeah, I love that album.
Yeah, at my what number are we up to now? 10,
6.
6. Yeah, I have Dimension Hatros on there, and exactly what Will mentioned. I almost was going to do one of my put the two records together at one time because that and Phobos kind of go together. I didn't put Phobos in my top 10 only because it's one of those things where it's like I couldn't squash it in, but I kind of felt it should be in with this record because they are kind of the two compatible records.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like Dimension Hatros a lot. I think there's a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of like, that's the one thing that's always been interesting about Voivod, as we've talked about, is they have so many different influences. You've got, and it just depends on the decade they're in too, because so many different things are going on in music and metal at that point, and they were kind of getting a lot of those influences too. But I think that's a super strong record, especially for the time that it came out.
Yeah.
So I am up to number 6 for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I am with Target Earth. I dig the title track a lot, and of course the Kluskklap Oklum. Is it Oklum or Klum? I can't even pronounce it, but
Sounds good to me.
Another, I thought, strong record that from the latter, I think that was the one before the Wait, correct? Yes. Sold quite a bit of that, and I believe saw that tour. That was the tour that they played the Chance, and we sponsored for one of our anniversary parties at the shop, I believe. Napalm Death were on the road with them that night. It was a blizzard in Poughkeepsie too. I can remember my buddy drove me. It was after my accident where I broke my leg and arm, and that was maybe 2 or 3 shows into when I was finally getting back around, and we had that, and my buddy drove me there. It was like hell getting back from Middletown to Poughkeepsie that night. One of those.
That's why I didn't go that night. That was a bad storm.
Yeah. So that was my number 6.
My number 6, I'm going to put the most recent one up pretty high, the Wake. I listened to that a ton when it came out, and I think that was a top 10 of the year for me at the end of the year. So great album, great riffs, catchy, End of Dormancy. What else? Obsolete Beings. I mean, it's just, for me, it kind of combines their early, really raw sound with the more proggy stuff. And I think that the last couple albums with Chewy are just kind of, it's classic sounding Voivod once again.
Yeah.
Totally. Number 5 for me is Dimension Hatros. That's the first album I bought by Voivod. I was already familiar with them. I had heard their other stuff, but that's the first one I owned. And the record skipped. So you're already listening to a band that has odd time signatures and, bizarre arrangements, and the record skipping here and there. So it took me a long time to get into it. I was like, what the fuck is this band doing? After I realized it was skipping, I got way into it. And yeah, it turned thrash metal on its side. Like, it's just completely different than anything else that was going on. I remember that tour, they headlined over Faith No More and Soundgarden. So like they were riding high at that point. That and Nothing Face were their high point as far as commercial success, it seemed like. But yeah, Dimension Hatros, the video for Tribal Convictions, that blew me away. I'd never seen anything like that before or since, to be quite honest. So yeah, I love Dimension Hatros. I love the concept. Everything about it's great.
And that's an odd tour, but I remember that tour. I do remember that tour. It was like a kind of a mixmash of bands. That was a little
kind of neat, though, when you think about it.
But that was a great tour, and that was a real, I mean, for me, because obviously we were at Voivod early on, and then we actually did both Faith No More and Soundgarden promo for both of those, especially Faith No More. I was really heavily involved with the real thing. And seeing that become super huge was great. And that tour was kind of one of those moments where all sorts of metalheads were into it. So it was kind of, and I think Faith No More was kind of the tipping point because before then, if you like Slayer, you couldn't like Queensryche. It was very much, battling each other. And Faith No More came out and kind of everybody liked them. And then you go out with that tour where you had grunge and metal and all this other stuff, and everybody got along and went. That was a pretty important tour, I think, in that whole history of what was going on.
Yes.
But to go back to the old days, so my top 5, I'm old, So I like the old Voivod stuff just because I was around, obviously, when all that was happening. I just love the youthful energy and rawness, and they're definitely doing something that they didn't sound like anything else at that point, which was cool. They had their kind of own genre. So at number 5, I have Roar.
All right.
Classic old school Voivod.
Number 5 for me, I have the Outer Limits. Pete already reached on to the one song on there, which I listened to last night before I went to sleep, was Jack Luminous. What an epic track that was. And dig the first track, Fix My Heart. I think it was a smooth album. I remember playing the hell out of that when it came out in the shop back in the day. Outer Limits, number 5 for me.
Well, Brian and I are on the same page of, once again, Roar from 1986. It's the first Voivod album I heard. I actually heard the debut after I heard Roar. And I remember the first thing I thought when I first heard that, I'm like, God, these guys sound a lot like Venom, in spots, right? But, revisiting over all these years, I mean, Fuck Off and Die is still a great song. Build Your Weapons and Korgel the Exterminator. I mean, that's like classic Voivod. And like Will said, it's noisy, it's chaotic, but that was the charm of early Voivod. Those first 3 albums. I mean, you can't beat that stuff, right? So that's my number 5.
My number 4 is Outer Limits. Production-wise, it's maybe the best they've ever sounded. I love the production on the album. And oddly enough, all the drum parts are done by an electronic drum set. Michelle told me that he used an electronic drum set for that album, and the drums sound great. I mean, I'm not going to endorse electronic drums, but they sound amazing. He got the right tones, and Jack Luminous is a huge milestone. And that song is just incredible, especially like you said earlier. It came out in the mid '90s, and bands weren't really doing that type of stuff. And to put out a 17-minute song was great. And the 2 songs leading up to that too, the whole sci-fi trio of Time Warp and Lost Machine, those 3 songs, for a good almost half hour, you're in a sci-fi Twilight Zone world, and it's just great. I love it. I love the artwork, the album cover, the 3D glasses, everything was kick-ass.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about the 3D glasses.
Yeah, it was a nice little gimmick.
Yeah, it worked. It was a great gimmick.
All right, so number 4, I've got Negatron, which you guys so wonderfully talked about earlier. I've not much more I can add to that other than it's classic stuff. So number 4, Negatron for me.
Great comeback album.
Yes.
Cool.
Surprising too. I was kind of surprised at how well that record was. So
totally.
Yeah. Awesome.
Totally.
My number 4, if you're done. I didn't mean to cut you off if you still have something to say.
Good.
Good. Now, my number 4 is Nothing Face. Another album I wore out, I think, at Rock Fantasy when it came out. Unknown Knows, the wonderful Pink Floyd cover. I still remember bugging out metalheads that weren't familiar with the early psychedelic Pink Floyd. What the hell is this? Who's the god? Who's the dog? I can remember people bugging out, and then I said, well, this is the original version, in case you didn't know. It was a Pink Floyd cover, but there was a lot of customers that didn't even know it was a cover at first. But what a great album. I was listening to it here the other night. Could even be higher in this list, but it's at number 4.
My number 4, I actually bought this LP and Roar and Killing Technology from Mr. Keeler way back in the day.
Thank you.
War and Pain, my number 4 from '84. It's funny because I tend to not like much punk style music. But I do love Motorhead, and I really dig War and Pain. Again, I'm going to go back to what Will was saying earlier. It's that's like Voivod in their infancy. They really hadn't figured it out yet, but there's this certain kind of charm about that album. It's so raw and so underground, but that's the appeal of it. And, that came out on Metal Blade when Brian, you guys were releasing all sorts of stuff that kind of was raw and underground sounding. And that was the appeal of most of the Metal Blade roster at the time. And I think that War and Pain, you'd listen to it today and it still sounds really fresh. So that's my number 4.
Cool.
Number 3 for me is Nothing Face. It's funny, when that album came out, I was really disappointed because it was so clean And especially after Dementia Hatros, you know, like a harsh sounding album, I was really shocked when I heard Nothing Phase because it just sounded so produced. But that didn't last very long. After listening to it a few times, I was like, holy shit, this album's amazing. And the video for the Pink Floyd song definitely helped me along for that album. Like, the video is amazing. And I saw them on that tour at the Warfield in San Francisco. That's probably the biggest place they've ever played in San Francisco, not counting the Ozfest. And that was, they were supporting Testament on the Practice What You Preach tour, and Nuclear Assault was opening for
That's a great.
So it was a hell of a show, and that definitely made me love Nothing Face even more after seeing that show. So that's my number 3.
Awesome.
Yep, I'm following up on that. Number 3, I have Nothing Face as well, and I like, you know, I love bands that evolve and take risks. It's one thing that I really always liked about Voivod is they've not ever been the same band. Like, you know, they'll do 2 records in a certain style, and then they'll go completely off. And that's like Will said, you know, this was a completely different type of direction that they were going in after the 2 other records. And I'm not a big Pink Floyd fan at all. You know, they're okay, but I'm not a stoner, so maybe that's partially why. But their Pink Floyd cover was amazing. I was like, holy crap, that's phenomenal. So yeah, I love that record, and definitely my number 3.
Right on. I'm not a big Pink Floyd fan either, so Voivod must be really good to make me dig that song.
Exactly, same. That's what I thought too. I was like, I really like Pink Floyd, but damn, this is a really good song.
Well, when you lend that metal to it, like look at Diamonds and Rust, and you know, like some of the other like metal stuff that's been done from, you know, Joan Baez or something, like Fleetwood Mac, Green Man Alicia has another, like, you know.
You could have a whole show. You could do a whole show on Judas Priest cover tunes because they've done.
There you go. My number 3 is Roar. You guys kind of explained it already. So I know we're on a timetable here. Korgel Exterminator, Thrashing Rage, strong, heavy, in your face album. That's my number 3.
All right.
My number 3, Killing Technology.
Woo.
1987. You know, classic Tornado.
Well,
right. This is not an exercise. Just you know, one song after another is just ravenous medicine. So many good tracks on here. And for me, this was their first kind of proggy album. I think they finally started to figure out the formula on this one right here.
I agree with everything you say. I agree with everything you say. That's my number 2 album. Killing Technology is number 2, but you could definitely notice a jump from Roar to Killing Technology, like in production and song structure and everything. Like they were, you could tell they've been touring. They're getting better at their instruments, and everything's starting to gel. You know, and Away's double bass is locked in. Like everything is great on that album. Forgotten in Space is probably maybe my favorite Voivod song. It's my favorite Voivod album cover. I love that cover. And it's a near perfect album for me. Like, it's funny, when I first heard I bought the vinyl when it came out, and there's only 7 songs on the vinyl version, but on the CD there's 9 songs. There's Cockroaches and Too Scared to Scream are the extra songs.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't know that for a couple of years, like, 'cause I had the vinyl, but I heard the cassette version of it at a friend's house, and I almost started hyperventilating when I heard Too Scared to Scream. I'm like, what is this? You know. But yeah, great album.
Isn't that the best when you hear like these like bonus tracks that were never on an original album, and they wind up being, and they release them later on, and they wind up being just about as good as anything that was on the regular album? There's nothing like that, right?
They're like, why didn't you include this? You know, and it also makes me angry that someone else knew about this and I didn't.
Yeah, that was back in the days when you had to put bonus tracks on CDs instead of
Totally.
But totally. I always argue with bands, like we talked about this a little bit earlier with bands, about, you know, you get, so let's say somebody goes into this 14 songs and you want 12 songs on the record, and the 2 they don't on the record sometimes are the best songs ever. I got a big, not an argument, but they came to my reasoning was Amon Amarth. When we did Call of the Thunderbat, they had that song as the 8th song on the record. on the sequence. I'm like, that's the best song you guys have ever written. It has to be the first song.
Yeah.
I got a little pushback from Michael Trenger, who ran our office in Germany, and RIP, by the way. And he was kind of the sixth member of On Mars, and he and I went at it for a while, but the band finally figured it out. So I was like, yes.
All right.
But anyway, so number 2, I'm a little biased here, obviously, because it's the record that we put out on Metal Blade, War and Pain. But when I got the original demo tape, so I forget who sent it to me. It wasn't the band; it was somebody else that sent it to me. And I just thought, oh my God, this is something that I've never heard of before. It's amazing. I want to sign the band. So we initially put them on a Metal Massacre album first, which is kind of the way we used to do things back in the day. And then
Condemned to the Gallows.
Pardon?
That was the song.
Yeah.
Condemned to the Gallows. Yeah.
So then we put out the record, and I just love what they did. I thought there was something really unique. It's super raw. Definitely Venom, Motorhead kind of come to mind with a North American band doing that. And my only regret on the whole thing was that we didn't end up working with them further, because I was young and dumb, and they were young and didn't speak any English. So we're kind of going through a mediary person to kind of help it out that I didn't think had anybody's best interest in mind. Maybe I don't remember exactly, but anyway, but War and Pain, and we along with the band did a really cool reissue a few years ago with a ton of extra stuff. So
Yeah.
out and about, so you can check it out. And so yeah, War and Pain for me, just because it was so raw and unique, and obviously it was the thing that launched this band to the world. We've now gone on to have this tremendous, amazing career, and such good guys, and they eventually learned English. That was helpful.
I always wondered why Metal Blade only put out the first album, so I'm glad you explained that. That was always
that was it. Just there was a lot of miscommunication because we couldn't speak the language, and so it just didn't go past that. So I was, I didn't know what I was doing at that point. I was still 22 years old or something. So
right. I also remember when War and Pain came out, either Kerrang or one of the bigger magazines said they're the worst band in the world or something, or worst album of all time or something.
Yeah, so much for that, right?
I used to love that because we talked about this when we did the whole Celtic Frost thing. Like, Kerrang did a review of Hellhammer and said at that point that was the worst thing that had ever come out, and I hadn't heard it yet. So I go, I have to hear this. And I heard it, I go, this is the most amazing thing ever. I have to put this out in the U.S. So anything Kerrang hated, I usually love. So,
there you go.
You're right about that.
Cool. So you ready for my number 2?
Go for it.
Number 2, Dimension Atros, macro solutions to mega problems and brain scans. And that album's amazing in my book. It's just amazing record from head to toe. And we're listening to that out here drinking and like playing some pinball, and it was very good. And that's my number 2, I guess.
My number 2, Nothing Face from '89. I kind of like the cleaner sound on here. It's proggy. I like prog stuff. Astronomy Domine is one of the best covers done by a metal band ever. The Unknown Knows, Missing Sequences, all great stuff. I like that. You got to really give a lot of credit to Piggy, man. I mean, such an incredibly unique guitar player. I mean, all sorts of off-kilter riffs and things, man. Just really added so much to this band's music. So that's my number 2. Love it.
All right. My number 1, by no means am I trying to be different by picking this as my number 1 or being ironic or anything, but Angel Rat's my favorite Voivod album for sure.
Wow.
When I couldn't believe what I was hearing when I first heard it when it came out, and not in a bad way. I was just like, oh my God, this is beautiful music. Like Clouds in My House was the first song I heard, and I love the vocal melody, and the vocal melodies on the whole album are just a step up. Like Snake really like practiced or something between the first 5 albums and that album. Like his vocals are definitely a step up, and I just love the whole folktale vibe of all the songs, and I love the production. Terry Brown did a great job, and the album cover, everything about it just clicks with me. I love it so much, and I'm glad they still play songs from it live in their set now. They still play The Prow. Almost every time I see them, they play The Prow, so that's really cool. I wish they would have toured for that album. At least they didn't tour in California, or I don't remember them touring the States. I don't know if that was the Rush album. I don't know if that was a
Oh,
tour.
I'm not sure either. I guess someone will add that in the comments, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember really wanting to see them on the Angel Rat cycle, and they never came to the Bay Area. So unless they just skipped the Bay Area, but I don't remember them touring.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
I don't think because they didn't. I don't think they played LA either on that album.
Yeah, right. I mean, they lost Blackie right after the album came out, so maybe that played a part in it. But I didn't see them until Outer Limits since Nothing Face. You know, I didn't see him until Outer Limits. But yeah, number one.
Cool. We got a minute. We got a minute left. So everybody, round robin. Let's do it.
Quick, my number one, Killing Technology has the original rawness of the first couple records, and then they kind of came into their own. Like you guys have all said, they learned how to play their instruments really well, and that's my number one.
All right.
My number one is Killing Technology also. Forgotten in Space. Tornado. How do you top it?
Yeah.
For me, the only way you top it is with this one. I love Dimension Hatros from '88. Tribal Convictions, man. Chaos Mongers, Brain Scan, Mega Problems, man. It's awesome. So what a great catalog. I think we can all agree on that. So
Totally.
Amazing band.
So thanks everybody for joining. For Will, for Brian, for Steve, visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. You know how it goes, guys. In the comments below, let us know your top 5 favorite albums, your top 10, 20, whatever. There's no right or wrong answer. They're all great. So thanks again, all you guys. Hope you had a good time here today. We'll see you all back hopefully in a couple weeks. We'll reconvene.
Yep.
And,
great seeing Will healthy, by the way.
Yes, exactly, Will. Good to see you.
You want to pop back on and visit? Why don't we do it? Rockfantasy.com. Death Angel. Metal Blade. Support us all.
That's right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.